All right. Hello. This is me, Hiski, as you may may have seen from my username. I'm a game designer from Finland, and I have been writing role-playing stuff for a good few years now. And most importantly, this game, Runecycle, I have been writing for about 4 years. It's finished 3 times. I think this is the fourth fourth version, and I hope this is going to be the final thing. It's still in development, mid-process. I have an editor, and we've started going through it, but it resulted in some big rewrites. So this is now an unedited manuscript that hopefully will soon enter editing if testing goes well. So what I'm here to do now is go through the manuscript and kind of talk through my reasoning, my thoughts behind why I'm doing the things I'm doing. So, if you're interested in picking it up or any of my work, you can go to games.hiskih.fi for Finland to pick the free playtest copy or anything else I've made. But do note that it's still in progress. It should work. I've been testing the older editions a bunch, but there's been some big changes. Otherwise, this video should at least explain to you how you should feel about it. Not rambling. Let's get to it. I'm not gonna be reading through the text like word for word, only if there's something important. Otherwise, I'm just gonna explain it to you, and you can follow along. Starting from the first page, which has a poem here, which probably will end up being changed as well. But essentially, if I will read through the important part, Runecycle is about us. It's about life, people, culture, and heritage. It's about grief and joy and renewal. It's about acceptance, rejection, and strife. About being human. And I have dedicated this game to those we've yet to meet and those we've had to let go. Signed by yours truly, obviously. And if that says nothing about the game for you, well, we go to the touchstones, where I've always loved Metroidvanias, 2D Metroidvanias like Hollow Knight, Ori, and the like. And also two of my favorite games being Gris and Neva by Nomad Studios. I envisioned this kind of fantasy world that is beautiful, yet kind of haunting. If you played Gris or Neva, you know what I mean. That it's the world is it's not a medieval world, although they often do have medieval stuff in them, but it's not really the life itself that's the point. It's kind of like these worlds are kind of like metaphorical by themselves. Like the world only exists. Like Gris is, I'm not gonna spoil it much, but this is from the Steam page, but it's essentially a reflection of the main character, the world. And Neva also has very like it has a story to tell, and I feel like the world building kind of is for an emotional journey more than a real place. That makes any sense. It's the same thing with like Journey and Sky and Monument Valley. Monument Valley is an interesting one, but it has these funky like twisted structures, which is the other part of this whole thing with both Hollow Knight having the Hollow Nest is a complex labyrinth of, it's a Metroidvania. It's a bunch of enemies and rooms, and of course the Eternal Ruins by Sam Carr, also like an infinite mysterious ruin. So that's the other part, where Runecycle is a game that I want you to see as like it's effectively a reflection of emotion, brought real into these like impossible dungeons essentially, but they're not dungeons from a medieval, like old school role playing sense. Although I want you to play the game in that way anyway. But it's more they're more emotion driven locations. Like the locations have an identity to them that's kind of like the locations feel some like they aren't alive, but kind of we'll get to it. But they feel like something. Then the magic part, the titular rune cycle, the runes. Well, I'll talk about it later on what that means. But the magic here, inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender, as a lot of fantasy media nowadays is, Full Metal Alchemist, The Dragon Prince, The Owl House, and Witch Hat Atelier. And if you know the last four of them, Avatar is a bit of an oddball here, but we'll get to it. I want the magic to feel like a craft, not like a wish, and also not like not an exclusive thing. It's a thing. It's a cultural thing that people can do. Anyone can do it. Most people will do it, but it's going to be dangerous for a lot of people to do it, of course. And it also can be done as a science. But you as a player don't really treat it as science. We'll get soon as to why. Briefly also going through the games that has inspired this game, and all of these references are like in flux. I will edit, add, and remove things based on what ideas I end up eventually using and how I want the like details of the feeling of the game to be. So 13th Age, Ars Magica for the magic, obviously. Blades in the Dark has it's just a good game. It has like a very particular way of dealing with things, and it's a version of it's not PBTA, it's Forge in the Dark, but you know what I mean. It has a PBTA style fail forward style. City of Mist, I'm a big fan. Haven't played, but I've read it. I'm really inspired by it. For the tag system and kind of the other implementation of like kind of like a PBTA continuation. Cipher system has some point pools, all manner of things. Kind of the way your character is defined by things that you are. There's like statements and things. Then going to Daggerheart, the big new new fantasy RPG on the block, I suppose. Had some fantastic ideas on like how resources work, how character building works, and how tags can be used. We'll get to it. It's a combination of City of Mist tag system and Daggerheart. I think the experiences. There's a couple more. Dragonbane. Just it's brilliant. It's simple. It's clean. The characters are wonderful. Simple. Not all of these are like immediately obvious. Just read them and really like them. I guess the action system in Dragonbane, active defense. I think in Dragonbane maybe. Grimwild also like a narrative fantasy adventure game, kind of like again take an inspiration to how the tags work and kind of how the spellcasting maybe works as well. His Majesty the Worm, a big inspiration. I just got it recently, and I get a bunch of changes in it just from reading it. Really bringing in those like bonds and kind of like the OSR but narrative story, people first approach. Into the Odd, just it's the whole like layout. I want to make this game an A5 book, single column, simple, clean. I really appreciate how Into the Odd is like so concise with the words that it uses. Legends in the Mist is the continuation of City of Mist. The tag system is more from here than from City of Mist, but I've listed both. Shadow Dark for concise stat blocks and just overall, again, great A5 book. Slug Blaster probably will get removed from this list. It has inspired me, certainly. I guess in the way that like Slug Blaster makes you play your character and your story as the way it is. Like the game tells you how the game mechanically enforces you to play a story. So maybe, but this game used to have a bit more detailed of a personal path. I've kind of narrowed it down. Vagabond pulp fantasy role playing game is absolutely the magic system is inspired by it. The like defense. I mean, what Vagabond got inspired by Dragonbane, so there's the block system, just the overall way you kind of handle things in the like clean, but then still also like kind of gameplay driven. White hack, for the magic, how like white hack just says do whatever, just talk it out, just make a ruling. So Runecycle kinda does that. And Year Zero engine was the base for Runecycle originally. I've since built away from it, but the dice ladder system is based on the Year Zero engine, which means the probabilities are also fairly Year Zero-y. And I'm also now Year Zero doesn't have a mixed success, but Runecycle does. So do what you will, but Year Zero engine has like a you have a success, and then you can do extra things based on how many more successes you get. So some of that is here as well. But moving on to the actual introduction, I might just read this for you, I guess, or maybe not. But if we go through this, basically, the world started when a great cosmic phoenix died. Tragic, I guess, and gave birth to spirits, like powerful entities born of energy. The four most powerful of them, Terra, Astra, Sol, and Luna, wrote the world to existence and became the Earth, the stars, the sun, and the moon. And they wrote the world into existence with runes. Everything was given a true name in the form of a rune. And these spirits, not just these four, but all of the spirits in the world, there's a lot more, tiny ones, big ones, There's no gods, but the most powerful spirits are effectively gods. So there's not really a distinction. And they maintain the circle of life, which the denizens call the Runecycle. Which this has some ties into the whole like Hindu reincarnation cycle. It's a big theme in Runecycle. I can see from the Phoenix immediately that the Runecycle is about kind of like cyclical reincarnation, kind of dealing with death and the past, and kind of like renewing. There's the whole like samsara. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm terribly sorry. From Hinduism, that kind of Runecycle is very comparable to like the world soul. The cycle. Moving on, the spirits built the world from an ethereal liquid-like form of magical energy known as ink. It colors the world and comes in a variety of colors and shades. And inkwells are locations around the world that constantly flow with ink, which is strong enough to ward off blight. We'll get to that soon. So essentially, there are these like holes in the ground or magic locations where these like ethereal, kind of like Soul from Hollow Knight, all of these different games have these like magic glowing energy things that you have. That flows from locations, and it kind of like blesses the ground around it to be safe from the creeping blight. So then towns and cities get built around these inkwells because they are protected, and it essentially is like life energy. It also grants you magic. Then if an inkwell dries up, then the town is kind of in really bad danger because the blight will come in. Moving on to the blight itself, which is the counterpart of ink, colorless blight. So essentially, kind of you see ink as like color, life, the world as it is, colorful, wonderful, lovely. Maybe if you know the reference games, you know what I mean by this. And then there's the black and white and gray blight that kind of just is the antithesis of colorful life, the joy of living. And it creeps, grows like these like black evil plants, corruption, mushrooms, everything that seems kind of yucky, sludgies and slimes and tentacles, whatever. Up to you, really. Uh, it kind of like grows on the world and like moves to places. But the interesting part is blight can rewind time and corrupt the past. So when blight claims an area or a person or an animal or whatever, it can kind of like rebuilds it into like a corrupted version of itself. As I say here, cursed mockeries of life once lived. So blight is kind of like it's the antithesis of life, but it is still living, just not the way we live. Kind of like this whole ink blight paradigm is the big conflict in Runecycle essentially. And I can say already because it's going to be touched on later in the book in sections that are not unfinished, so we're not going to talk about them. I kind of see the blight essentially as the flames of the phoenix, where the phoenix wants to be reborn, but its death gave life to us and the spirits really don't want the phoenix to be reborn. But then that's the natural way things go. So the world is going to end eventually unless we keep it going by living. But is that the right thing to do? Like, I find this really interesting, and I hope you do as well. Like, the way blight is death and accepting of that, but also we really don't want to, and we need to keep living in spite of it. But also accept it. It's an interesting concept. And then ink also, spoilers, is actually the blood of the phoenix that spills from the ground, because the land itself is actually the remains of the phoenix's corpse. Or kind of like whatever remains of the death of the phoenix. So then that also begs the question of like, it's a finite resource. It's coming slowly, magically from the ground, where kind of by a freak accident, essentially, ink turned into spirits that became life, who now don't want to give up what they are. And they are essentially immortal until the phoenix is reborn, I suppose, and they get absorbed. Who knows? That's up to you as a player, GM, to figure out. But that's where we are. That's kind of the story here, the big picture story. I'm not gonna explain to you how role-playing games work, but that's what explained here. But briefly, who you are as a player. Uh, you are a person living in this world on Terra, in an area we call the Lands Lost. For now, everything is asterisk, can change, but subject to change. Where about 100 years ago, there was a great empire of Sol, for the sun, for their sun god, not really a god, but who studied ink and the Runecycle and did great, wonderful things with their knowledge of magic as a science. But their, over overutilization of magic and science and trying to be more than they are. They tried to create an artificial god when they felt betrayed by the sun god, because the sun Sol could not prevent ink inkwells from drying up, because they can't. They can protect them somewhat, but essentially the Runecycle decided that it's time for the Empire to fall. Cycles, the whole shebang. So then they felt betrayed, and they decided, okay, we'll build our own god. With magic, we have ink. So then they tried that, and I'm not gonna say what happened. I'm not sure if I will ever in the book say what happened. They call it the Nova Project. And that ended up destroying all of the ink in the Empire and causing blight to just immediately crash in as a wave of death. And those people that survived, they fled to places that around the empire that still had life. But essentially, the whole empire collapsed in a really short amount of time, killing a bunch of people, obviously, leaving their corpses to be turned into evil blight creatures. Yay! And then the people that survived settled down into settlements and had children. And those children are your parents. And, they then had children. So about 100 years ago, empire collapsed. People fled, they had kids, and those kids now live, and they had kids, and now you are an adult, where your grandparents have essentially very likely died or are really old. This is, again, subject change, kind of like, it's a loose thing, where you have a connection to the empire, but just barely, where your parents have learned things from your grandparents who either lived in the empire as children or young adults, or were born to parents quite quickly after the collapse. So there's a lot of knowledge, like people know about it. People know they don't know really what happened, but people know about the empire, whatever info survived. It's kind of like how we see like World War One, soon World War Two, where it happened. We feel the effects still. We know it happened. None of us young people, I'm fairly young, know people who lived through that war. Soon there's not going to be anyone alive who was there. So then we don't really know about it, but we have a lot of stories about it that we know, and we know places that existed. Like people mapped out the places because you still live in the ruins of the empire, whatever survived between the like big blight areas. Maybe there was an inkwell somewhere, and you kind of like huddled around it. So then now you have the settlements and small city-states, villages, towns that have this emotional connection to a place that no longer exists, but you would love to bring back, even though maybe you shouldn't, because you see what happened when people went through too far. So that's what you do. You delve into these lands to salvage, to find resources, because there's a bunch of resources and knowledge and technology. The problem is all of that needed skill and tools and materials and manufacturing, which you don't have. So this lets you basically find things in the ruins that you might find a resource that could be used for a great magical effect. But you can't use it because you don't know how, or then you might know how to use things, but you lack the tools. So then you go there, you maybe find the resources, but then you have to go somewhere else to find the tools, and then find a person or a settlement that has the necessary information on how to do the thing to create magic. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about the magic when I get to the magic. But this has already been a lot of explanation from the get-go. So let's keep going, I suppose. There's some basic procedure stuff. This is a fiction first game. Play fiction first. If the rules get in the way, ignore the rules. And it's a creative problem-solving game. So play the fiction, do the things that your character wants to do, and only roll dice when it's important. And also, I'm not going to be super detailed in this book about how the world is. Like the past and the empire and the cultures. I will give some like layup for you. But all of the culture and people is yours to write. And for your players especially to come up with. If the players decide that they are descendants of someone, that's their ownership of that part of history. because also like history changes throughout the stories. So when you say your grandparents were this or that and they did this or that, and this is your cultural tradition, there's no proof that that's everyone's cultural tradition or that it actually happened. So when you say that this is my tradition, it's real for you, but it doesn't mean that every other person from your culture does the same thing, because the culture essentially exploded. So whatever cultural habits you have are surviving, but they can be changed from what they used to be because life is different now. So don't worry about having the correct lore, because I'm not going to give it to you. I'm going to give you some to like kind of build on. But this is ultimately a dungeon crawler anyway.